Nerdvengers, it is Josh, and Loki is almost upon us. We wanted to do our preview video for the show, and we are very, very excited about this show. Real quick, before we get into the detail, we just want to let everybody know that we will be doing a watch party live for Loki every week, starting at 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time over on our live streaming channel. It's going to be a ton of fun. We hope to see you guys over there. We also have a couple exclusive pieces of Loki merchandise, which will only be available during the 6 weeks that Loki is airing. All right, everybody, I'm excited. I know a lot of you are excited as well for Loki on Disney Plus. And there's a ton of things to go over in this video. We want to generally start with non-spoilery stuff, and towards the end of this video, we will get into slight spoilers, leaks, and rumors for things that could happen in Loki. But there's plenty of sort of non-spoilerly, official, like review type stuff out there. The social media embargo for the people that have seen the first 2 episodes of Loki has lifted, and the official review embargo will lift tomorrow. We'll see what the Rotten Tomato score and all that looks like officially tomorrow, but we're putting up some of the different tweets from various influencers, reviewers, and screeners out there when it comes to Loki. The most important thing we want to mention here, guys, is that it is very positive, extremely positive buzz coming out from Loki. But on top of that, there are some specific things being said about Loki that are very exciting to us and that we think the Nerdvengers will find to be absolutely delightful. The first main idea is that this is a show that is going to be extremely consequential to the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, particularly when juxtaposed against what the other shows were able to do, right? Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, while serving their own individual characters and the arcs of those characters well, did not tie into the overall MCU continuity and what could be happening in the future of the MCU as much as we thought they would. Now, a lot of people were saying this is just the way the shows are going to be. They're not going to be that consequential. They're going to be sort of take them or leave them type shows on Disney Plus. But Kevin Feige himself has come out in an interview with Empire Magazine recently and said the following. He said that Loki will have more impact on the MCU than any of the shows so far, and that it is tremendously important. Now, I want to stop for a second there and talk about the writer, the head writer of the Loki series, Mr. Michael Waldron. And if you've been watching the streams or a couple of the videos or maybe even a Nerdy News rundown recently, you may have heard me mention Michael Waldron. He is a very up-and-coming writer as far as working over at Marvel Studios. This guy was a part of the writing room over at Rick and Morty. He gets tapped by Marvel Studios. He is the head writer and designer of the Loki series. And then when Scott Derrickson walks away from Doctor Strange 2 over creative differences, Michael Waldron is tapped by Kevin Feige to collaborate with Sam Raimi to create a whole new script and story for Doctor Strange 2 Into the Multiverse of Madness. But on top of that, Michael Waldron was also handpicked by Kevin Feige to be the writer of his Star Wars project. He's also heavily involved in working with the writers of Ant-Man 3, Jack Schaefer, and just other people with the MCU. He signed a massive deal with Disney to be developing things with them for a long time, and he's considered to be one of the new usherers in of the new canon past Phase 4. And just the fact that this guy making this show has now gone on to be so heavily involved with the MCU moving forward is at least some indication that, yes, Loki is going to heavily set up things to come in the MCU while also potentially tying in things we have seen in the MCU in the past. Another thing that seems to echo through a lot of the social media posts that different people have made about the first 2 episodes of Loki is that it is more of a purely entertaining show than the other 2 MCU shows. Both WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier dealt with trauma in different ways. They are really character studies in a lot of ways and very intimate to the struggles of those characters. And while we likely will see this Loki go back and forth between being super evil or potentially a little bit good and just kind of finding his way back to the version of Loki that we see in Endgame, right? Like sort of just reinvestigating that arc. We also don't really expect it to be filled with a lot of trauma, or at least not focus on the trauma as a major element of the show. This show is going to be very bombastic. It's going to be absolutely all over the place with the time travel element and the buddy cop element with Owen Wilson. The show is being said to just be purely entertaining and much more of just the exciting kind of stuff we expect from a fun Marvel movie than potentially, again, Falcon the Winter Soldier and WandaVision were. And that sort of, again, just brings us to another element being praised out there on social media, and this is the chemistry between the Mobius agent, who is played by Owen Wilson, and Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, of course. Now, Tom Hiddleston, important to note, got a producer credit for the show and is apparently very involved in just making sure that everything really fit to the Loki that we know and love from the MCU, and so that is absolutely brilliant. But Hiddleston himself has also spoken to just how good Owen Wilson is in this show, and this is something that is echoed again in a lot of the social media posts about the first 2 episodes. So basically, buckle up, Marvel fans. We've got an exciting 6-hour journey ahead of pure entertainment. The episodes are going to be super long. They're going to be very pithy with a lot of detail for the MCU canon. And apparently they're going to set up an enormous amount of stuff for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline. Now, let's just touch on a couple of other things that we more or less see in the marketing material and the preview for Loki. This isn't spoilery stuff, although it is getting into some of the plot that is, being assumed from what we see in the trailers. We know that Loki is going to get picked up by the Time Variance Authority shortly after when we see him in Avengers Endgame take the Tesseract and try to escape. He's going to be brought to the Time Variance Authority, which is this organization that exists outside of the flow of regular time, and they are apparently tasked with protecting the sacred timeline. And we assume that sacred timeline is the one we saw in the Infinity Saga leading up to Infinity War and Endgame, although we are not 100% sure of that. We think that is what the sacred timeline is. And therefore, a wider explanation of what exactly went wrong perhaps in Endgame or what is currently going wrong now in Phase 4 of the MCU will be explained. We also know that Mobius is an agent specifically tasked with the knowledge of Loki. He's like a Loki super fan that just knows everything there is to know about Loki and all of the different versions of Loki. And we think, from what we see in the marketing material, that Mobius wants to use Loki to try to help out a separate thing that is going on in the TVA. Someone else is messing with the sacred timeline, and Mobius believes that this variant Loki, the one we see from Endgame, is the perfect person to help discover who the real threat is, the person that is manipulating the timeline. Okay, so now let's get into some more speculative / rumor stuff. This is where we might get into potential spoilers, so we hope that you have enjoyed the video so far. If you don't want any other spoilers, get on out of here. But now we're going to get into that sweet, sweet speculation. Take my hand. It's time once again for speculation time. We have heard that this show is likely getting another season, and at first everybody was like, oh, that's awesome, more Tom Hiddleston, but I wouldn't be so sure, as another of the big rumors and leaks out there is that we will see other versions of Loki in the show. That is more or less confirmed, and we think we will see at least female Loki, a young version of Loki, and then an old or classic version of Loki, who is said to be played by Richard E. Grant, and I personally can't wait for that because I really like Richard E. Grant. And we think that we may see other versions of not only Thor, but potentially other characters we have also seen in the MCU. We don't know if you'll see the actual versions or the versions of these characters that we have seen in the Infinity Saga thus far, but we might just see totally different versions of these characters that still feel familiar to the versions we know from the Infinity Saga. In fact, it is rumored that we shall see various versions of Thor himself, including a version of Thor where he is a frog, which is a classic callback to the comic books. And man, if we really see Throg and he really actually does some damage in the show, that would be absolutely fantastic. But I think the biggest big rumor out there is that Kang the Conqueror, Nathaniel Richards from the comic books, who we know is going to be played by Jonathan Majors and will likely be the villain of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, there's the rumor that he will be involved in the Loki show. Now, some people are saying he will be the big bad of the entire show, that it will be revealed that the entire Time Variance Authority is controlled by Kang the Conqueror or perhaps his relatives or people connected to him. Some people believe it'll just be one little tease we see in an offshoot timeline, and you'll see Kang the Conqueror, and it'll just be a little setup for the version that then we will see in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantum Mania. I personally think it's possible we see multiple versions of Kang, and I'm not so sure that Kang will be the big bad of the Loki show, but I think if they really are going to set up Kang the Conqueror, what better way, or what better show rather, to set up a Kang the Conqueror type character than the Loki show? And as an old school fan of the comics, I do remember comic book runs where Kang the Conqueror and Loki worked together, and they also betrayed each other. In fact, I remember having a Hero Click where they were literally together, and then later on they betrayed each other, and there was some effect on the card that, made this thing happen from the comics. It was really cool and nerdy. And there's a part of me that's like, man, Mobius might know that Loki, being the mischievous, crazy god that he is, would be the perfect person to thwart someone like a Kang the Conqueror. And I'd love to see that being something that unravels as the show goes on. But again, many fans are concerned about this and don't want to get too hyped up or excited for the possibility because of what happened with that Evan Peters boner. And no, I am not over the boner. But I'd be willing to possibly let it go if we get some sweet Kang the Conqueror action. Feels very Marvel Comics to me. Either way, that's your preview video for the Loki series. Again, we want to remind you, we're going to be doing a watch party 2:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, late Tuesday night, depending on how you look at it, over on our live streaming channel. And we have exclusive pieces of merch to commemorate Loki, and you will only be able to buy that merch on our Teespring store during Loki as it airs. And again, if you are a Nerdvenger member, a member over on our live streaming channel, remember you get 20% off all of our spring or Teespring merchandise, and you can find that code on the Discord or on the community tab on the live streaming channel. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.